In order to allow economical shipping by UPS, the squeezer is disassembled for shipping. When you receive the box, you have to unwrap everything, take all the bubble wrap off, take all the parts out of the bag, and when you get done, you'll find the main head, which is the blue guy on the left, the main head assembly, then the center column in the middle here, the column and chain puller assembly, and then to the right, the triangular base and pedal assembly. You'll also find some smaller parts. Here are the toggle clamps. There should be 8 toggle clamps and 32 little screws. They're 832 by 3/8 pan Phillips. Then over here are over to the right, the blue guys are the spacers that the head mounts to. Then there's a bunch of screws that, moving over to the left, you'll see 1/4 by 3/4 socket head screws. There's 8 of them and 4 nuts. Then moving to the left a little more, you'll see 1/4 by 1/2, and there's 6 of those. Then there's a little 1/4" unthreaded pin. And then I'm also showing the tools that will be required for assembly. It's not a lot of tools. And that would be a couple of hex wrenches. The one on the top right is a 3/16, and a ball end works a little bit more conveniently, but you can use a straight one if that's all you have. And then below that is a 3/32 hex driver. And then I'm showing a 7/16 open-end wrench for holding the nuts while tightening. You can use an adjustable if you want. And a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. Don't cheat and use a number 1, use a real number 2. The first step in assembly is going to be to assemble the main column here. And that goes on the triangular base. I'm doing it on the floor because I don't have a clean work table available, and I just kind of want to get the video out of the way. You can do it on the floor, you can do it on a table. This is using the 1/4 by 3/4, the longer hex drive screws. And there's pretty much, let me take the screws out here. There's the screw hole pattern is oriented in such a way that it really only goes on 2 ways, and they're both correct. So don't worry about getting the thing misaligned. Then put in the screws. They might fit a little tight. Pretty much everything I do, I try to do tight tolerance, and sometimes they end up being a little too tight. Then using the hex driver, and you can see why the ball end is kind of nice, because it allows you to get a little bit of angle and make it easier to get them on. But, you know, if all you have is a straight one, use what you got. Just a side note about tools, I tend to avoid the kind of pocket knife style multi-hex drivers. I think they're just a royal pain to use, and I prefer individual hex drivers. Then you can use whatever wrench you have to grab the nut and tighten it down. And I'm not going to tighten all of them. You can pretty much guess what's going on from here. So the next step is going to be connecting the link to the lever, and this is done with the little 1/4" unthreaded pin. You kind of line up the holes here and push the pin through, and then using the small hex driver, there's going to be a little set screw in the bottom of the lever. It's a little 1032 set screw. And then just tighten. Doesn't have to be really tight, just slightly finger tight. You're only retaining the pin to keep it from pulling out. And now the lever is attached. After attaching the lever, rotate the assembly to the upright position and then start assembling these spacers. And the spacers will use the smaller screw, the 1032, the quarter 20 by half-inch socket screw, and just thread on the little spacers. And once they're in place, use the hex key to tighten them. It's not necessary to tighten them super tight, and definitely don't grab the nice anodized surface with a pliers because you'll just booger it up. Just grabbing it by hand is sufficient. It will do the job just fine. It doesn't need to be tightened super, super tight. Giving me a little trouble, so. Sometimes the anodize builds up on the inside of the threads and kind of makes them a little difficult to thread on. So now you put on the head, and one of the upper supports here, one of these supports has the logo on it, and even though it isn't really super important, it kind of looks cooler if the logo is facing the foot pedal. So grab the head, put it in place, kind of roughly line it up over the holes, then using the quarter 20 by 3/4 screws, you kind of line it up by eye where you can see the screw holes, and just kind of get one started. The little spacers are made fairly precisely, but who knows, that you may need to wiggle things around a little bit to get everything to line up. And there's 4 screws that go into the holes. May be necessary to wiggle things around a little until everything lines up. And there it is. In the next step, we're going to be connecting the puller rod and adapter plate, and that will be connected to the puller plate on the top. So grab the foot pedal and then kind of push it upward, and it should be a fairly tight fit. Everything in this everything in the squeezer is made with fairly tight tolerances. So we're going to be using the quarter 20 by half-inch socket screws, and you kind of have to get your hand in here and find the holes. There are 2 of these little guys, and they go in kind of like that. I don't want my hand to block the camera too much. If you can't find the hole, just kind of wiggle it around a little bit, but it should line up pretty much correctly. And then kind of snake in the hex driver, and yes, it can be a little bit tricky to get them all to line up, but it's not that hard. So there you have it. That's most of the work. And now it's squeezing. So one more step and then we're done. Using the number 2 Phillips screwdriver and the little 832 by 3/8 pan Phillips screws, We're going to mount the toggle clamps now. So, fairly straightforward. You can pretty much guess how it works. The holes in the toggle clamps may be a little bit on the sloppy side. Don't worry about it. There's nothing precise going on here. If it fits, it's good. So pretty much put all the screws in before tightening. Just put them in barely touching the surface to make sure that they all line up. And then once they look like they're all lining up, and tighten them down. And there you have it. Octavius squeezer ready for action.